Mm. So lovely. Thank you so much, William Keyte, for joining me today on Wise Women Weekdays. It's great to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time, although we had a good chat the other day, which led me to invite you onto my little show. So thank you for being here. William, can you first, just for the audience, describe sort of yourself, who you are, what you do, a little bit of background so we know what we're dealing with here or who we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, it's great to be on, Karen. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, no, I've at the moment I'm a constitutional law researcher, which normally makes people run in the opposite direction. But that's not the subject that I started out in my profession. So originally I was a teacher and a musician. So I taught music in schools, and eventually changed subject, went into technology, was doing a lot of database design in schools and teaching the ICT curriculum, as we called it back then. And then around sort of 2006, I started to realize that things that we learn through the sort of mainstream channels of information are not necessarily to be entirely trusted. And I went down some very deep rabbit holes about all kinds of things to do with the medical profession mainly, but also sort of parallel governing systems, things that are sort of hidden behind our governing systems, methods and mechanisms that are used in the background in parallel that the people don't know about. It's not transparent to the people. And I started to explore that, a lot of information about how strings are pulled in the background, and went into all sorts of interesting information about the history of world wars, how they really came about and why, and who was interested perhaps in bringing those agendas about, if you like. And so I went into a lot of that information, very interesting. But eventually I landed up in the position of thinking that I needed to look at a deep philosophical level, how our rule of law works, certainly in this country, in Britain, but in nations generally, and started to consider all of those things to do with how we govern, how nations are governed, what is the nature of government, what is the nature of constitutions, all of that. And that's where I ended up, because I did that because I reckoned that was sort of the pinch point of everything in a way, because if you can, or depending on how and who is the final authority on who decides what is what and what's okay and what isn't in a country, that's kind of the ultimate thing that determines how badly things are going to go wrong or how well things are going to go right for the liberties of the people, the freedoms of the people, if you like. So that became my primary interest, and that's what that's where I ended up, and I'm still doing it.
What was it that triggered you? There you are playing your guitar and teaching gorgeous children in our gorgeous schools. What sort of made you become aware that something wasn't quite right then? Was it one specific thing, or was it a combination of many?
No, it was a whole range of things, sort of that came together at the same time. So, a lot of people say things like that, when things like that happen, it's meant to happen, It was a conglomeration of things, and but in particular, it was a time when my children were to be vaccinated, and I started to investigate what really is the nature of vaccination as a concept, and how the medical profession had arrived at that position, and what went on in the early years and in the late 1800s in the funding of the pharmaceutical industry and the bringing about of the allopathic medicine system, why that came about and who had the agendas that they did and who was funding it. And it's very eye-opening. And once you go into that information, you begin to realize, all the movers and shakers like the Carnegie Foundation and the and others, which I won't go into now, but that was a real eye-opener for me. And I realized at that point that this cannot possibly be isolated within that one area or that one power center of society, if that makes sense. You couldn't possibly contain that level of disinformation and agenda nefarious agenda, which is what it is when you start to look at it deeply. You couldn't contain that within one area. And so I thought logically, and I just reasoned that it must be spread wider than that, because how could it not? You know, it's going to spread into politics, it's going to spread into government policy and administration. It's going to go right across the board. And what the hell else have we got problems with here? You know. So what I discovered was it was a lot of foundational truths that underpin a lot of the sort of we build up an edifice of knowledge, of what we perceive as expertise and knowledge. And what you often find at the base of that, a long way down, are some somewhat tentative and rather weak points of where the veracity is lacking in that information. And that's where things become very problematic and quite dark behind it. But yeah, anyway, that was where
I mean, what were you teaching? Because you've given up teaching. I'm assuming then you've had to give up teaching to follow this path. Or
yeah, no, I didn't have to give up teaching, actually, and I stopped teaching a long time ago because I ended up going into business and IT properly anyway. I came out of education, and I continued to operate sort of broadly on the edges of the education world, because I was building database systems for schools. So at a technical level, I was doing some coding, but I was also liaising for companies, going into to speak with senior management teams in schools, because I understood how schools work.
Yeah.
And sort of systems that make schools work. You know, administration of you know, online login systems for parents and things like that. You know.
Sure.
So yeah, that was what I ended up doing.
You're a bright bloke then. You come from you know, an academic background. You're not some wacky guy that has just read a few things or seen a few podcasts and sort of gone down these rabbit holes thinking, you know, something's weird. What I'm trying to say is you're quite intelligent.
Well,
yeah?
I don't know. I never considered myself as particularly intelligent at school, because school is very good at telling you that if you're not academically successful, and there are certain bounds for that, or certain rather blunt measurements for what makes you successful at school, and that was why, in a way, I didn't fit in teaching, because I started to realize that true understanding and knowledge is not necessarily measured terribly accurately and well by the education system. And there were people who were falling between the cracks, who were actually had great capability, but clearly weren't within the education system the way that it deals with it. So I think I was one of those. So I was not a high flyer academically by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, probably quite the opposite. But I was thinking a lot, and I was thinking a lot of very different sort of out of the box things when I was at school, which doesn't really go down terribly well. And so,
no, of course not. It's like one size doesn't fit all, which I think is a problem with our education system, and it kind of, you know, tries to knock out the creativity, doesn't it? Especially now, you know, as luckily my kids aren't at school anymore, but it's changing in their school period. You could just see things happening, and the creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what often we're and this will get us onto the subject later on, but what people often don't realize is that true intelligence, that's made up of two words, two root words. That word, intellect, is on the one side, which is can be connected, I suppose, with what we traditionally call left brain thinking, which is this sort of logical, reasoned thinking that we absolutely need and we must use, and we need to be good at that. But society tends to favor that side, that left brain thinking, and that's associated with the masculine energy. Whereas the right brain thinking is the gents part of the word, which comes from the Latin word generare, which is the creativity, and the creativity is the feminine. That's the feminine aspect or energy within us, and the two have to go together. You don't have intelligence unless you bring them both to the table and exercise them both together. So yeah, that's I think is where the problem sometimes lies. Yeah.
Do you think it's a deliberate thing? Because also the world in which we live is very competitive and very commercial, and it's all about owning, you know, lots of things and having nice houses and cars and the best designer watches or the latest iPhone. I mean, do you think that's accidental? We've just gone into that kind of direction?
It's a difficult answer, yes and no. So there are, I suppose you could say, there are powers behind the scenes who would see mistakes that we make and traps that we have a tendency to fall into with a flawed human psyche, that they would be quite happy to play on that and to exaggerate it. So what I think is happening in reality, but because I've sort of been into the world of conspiracy, and and I've been through that, and I said to somebody on because I deliver courses on a lot of information to do with consciousness and human psyche and how this interplays with how we govern ourselves. And I said to somebody the other day on the course, I've been into the world of conspiracy and I've gone through it and I've come out the other side. and he said to me at the end, it's a very good question, because I hadn't really thought, he really sort of honed in on it. And I thought, good for you for doing so. What do you mean by that? And I think that my journey has been quite interesting, because I have been into that whole world of conspiracy and I have tested the veracity of that information a lot. And I've been down the rabbit holes and looked at the information deeply, and and yes, it's absolutely true that there's a hell of a lot going on behind the scenes that much of the population is completely unaware of. There are power games going on, absolutely no question about it. But is it all them? Is it all them as the enemy? That and increasingly my conclusion is that it's not really as simple as that. Because a lot of the conditions that are created, which we're experiencing now more than ever, sort of a sense of breakdown, a lack of abundance, lack of freedoms and liberty, a lack of latitude in society, if you like, all of that, those conditions come about largely because of flaws within our own psyche. So we kind of manifest those things ourselves through all kinds of unconscious, and what we mean by that is unaware behavior, aspects of ourselves within our own psyche that we don't even spot and we don't even notice. And that's what I started to explore more and more recently, because I thought, well, this is actually what it's all about. If we're manifesting this stuff and these conditions for ourselves, and maybe even sort of encouraging those that have a tendency towards psychopathic and sociopathic behaviors, we're sort of elevating them in our society and saying, yeah, you can go and be the big guy up there and tell us what to do. And we're sort of allowing people who maybe have those tendencies to rise into those positions within our society, because actually we have sort of patterns and dynamics and habits that we fall into that kind of calls for that and sort of puts that in place, and we don't even notice that we're doing it often, actually. And so it's actually a much more nuanced and much more complicated thing that is going on, I think. It's not all conspiracy, no, and therefore it's not a good thing to be sort of just simply hurling bombs at the other side and saying, you bastards over there are enslaving us and causing. I think it's a very cartoonish and rather immature way of looking at it, and I fell into that too. I was thinking, my God, this is really what's going on. No, I don't think it is quite that simple. I think there are some dangerous people around who would benefit from but what it really is us being not an equal match to that. We're weak and easily manipulated in our psyche because we're not grounded. We lie to ourselves about an awful lot of stuff. We gaslight ourselves, and what that causes is kind of split personalities. You become fragmented within your psyche. You're not grounded. We get into things like the 3 pillars of consciousness, which is the thoughts, feelings, and actions. That if what you feel, what you think, what you feel, and what you do or say is not in alignment and not in conflict, then it's very hard to manipulate you. You are really sorted. That's the definition of a conscious human being, is somebody who has gone into themselves and explored and analyzed themselves and to discover the lies that they tell themselves. And if you can get rid of that and you become authentic, it's really about authenticity.
Yeah.
Are you being authentic? And we can be inauthentic in all kinds of ways that we don't even spot. And that is, I think, the root of the problem. And Carl Jung got into this with the shadow work stuff, and the process of individuation is what it's probably really all about, to be honest. That was a long answer to that question.
No, but it's a good answer, and I was really focusing and concentrating so I didn't forget my next question. But I think you've already alluded to that about consciousness. But I'm going to come back to that, hopefully, if I don't forget. What I was going to ask you though is why do we put people on pedestals? Why do we look up to powerful people, or pop stars, or Hollywood movie stars, or sports people? What is that within us? Is it because, well, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to see if you've got an answer for me.
Well, I think there's a whole range of things going on there. You know, there's a whole range, you know, because we're not solid within ourselves, we're starting to look outwardly at others. We start to, you know, set other people up as heroes, or, you know, there can be all sorts of traps that we can fall into in that regard. And we're also lazy as well. You know, fundamentally, humans are quite lazy. If we can shortcut something, then, you know, that'll be great. But, you know, we also don't like looking at our own stuff because that hurts. And that's actually the darkest thing that anyone can ever do, really, in a way. You can, you know, you can be frightened and of all sorts of experiences in life, but actually the most frightening stuff quite often is the realization about yourself, about things that you've suppressed and hidden away because you don't, you know, that's a dark aspect of yourself, and there will be a reason for that. When that first came up originally, before it was suppressed, there will have been a reason for that in some regard. And quite often this goes back to sort of childhood traumas that have not been sort of reprocessed and reenacted, you know. And I should say, by the way, at this stage, I'm not a psychologist. I'm becoming more and more so as an amateur psychologist, because I find it genuinely fascinating. And I think actually a lot of this is, you know, when you get into sort of the mystery traditions and the esoteric sciences, and the study of natural law, which is really in a way what all of this is about, that requires us to look at some of these occulted subjects. And when I mention the word occult, a lot of people go, "Oh my God, this man is evil." And no, that's not what it means. You know, occult basically just means very deeply hidden subjects that are sequestered away. That there would be some in society that would be very happy if we didn't look at those, because it doesn't benefit those that might be in power. You know, if you can create a power differential over the people of society, and you're that way inclined to do that, as I've admitted that there are people around, many that would do that. That's the way it's done. You know, it's really, I suppose you could say that they are dark ancient psychologists, really, that go back not just hundreds of years, but we're talking millennia. You know, it's that old. But coming back to your subject, you know, so what is that about? It's about that fragmentation and those traumas and things that hit us in childhood, and we don't process them properly, so we then suppress parts of ourselves. The other thing that we tend to do is to create personas. You know, it's like when you meet somebody and you want to create a good impression. Well, that creating of a good impression is itself a lie. It's not being authentic, because you're trying to be somebody that you aren't. You know, and when you do that, you're creating problems for yourself, because each time you meet somebody where you've created that impression, you've got to maintain it. And the longer you maintain a lie, the more effort and energy that you've got to put into it, because it's not you. It's not you being genuine. And then you get a fragmentation of the psyche. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on. That's just like, it's all about, this is about a deep level healing as much as anything. But I would say that the biggest problems that people are seeing about our loss of liberty and other things really actually all stem from some of those things that I've just been talking about, really. It's not a light subject, is it? It's not.
No, well, it's not. That's why I can wait to talk to you, because it's, you know, it's I love it. I find it fascinating. You know, I've studied a little bit about Jung and done some psychology work and what have you, and it is fascinating. And I totally agree with you. You know, what's going on in the world, we have to do the inner work, but it's very painful, and
Yeah,
it's hard work, especially if you've got, you know, another choice of going down the pub or watching the telly, or, you know, there's easy ways out rather
yeah,
than focusing on the stuff, because a lot of us don't even realize that we have to do, you know, we've got problems, we
yeah,
just shove it under the carpet.
yeah.
And are you therefore saying that we are to blame for the situation in which we're in?
Absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really. It's just a reflection. It's the way that the universe holds up a mirror to us.
Yeah.
And actually, I would say on that topic that this is why those that you might call within what we broadly term the freedom movement, which is those that sort of have largely become awake to the fact that there is this sort of broad brush conspiracy within the world that we're not actually taught accurate information, really. And those that are sort of awake to that, it becomes a blame game entirely, pretty much. You know, it's always presented as a them and us. And that's a dangerous thing, because that gives people an excuse not to look at their stuff. And so, right,
Mm.
so that's why you can get yourself into a worse situation sometimes, not always, because recognizing the fact that we have outsourced aspects of our lives, and we've been gullible, and we've been led astray, and recognizing that is important, and we do need to do that. But overdoing it and hating on and blaming those people, because it's not as simple as that. Those people that people like to blame actually are just more people like you and I, who've got themselves into a kind of a confused state themselves. So
Mm.
remember what I was saying about, unaware behavior. Well, you've got that going on in people who are in positions of power that don't even realize that they're in a right old state themselves. So how much are they to blame when in fact you were you were tricked by it as well? So it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of nuance and a lot of scale in this, and a lot of, but we have to be, I think, a little bit more mature about it and understand. And once we start reflecting on that, and not, you still mustn't excuse immoral behavior, and that's one of the lessons that we have to learn within natural law, that it has to be called out, and it's particularly important, incidentally, when we're tempted to remain silent on something.
Mm.
So it's not just, we must be moral and not be immoral. It's
Mm.
also not speaking out as well and remaining silent. That's really important too. But it's divorcing the individual human being from the actions and the behavior. It's the actions and the behavior that we're calling out here, but the individuals themselves, we have to be, at least to some extent, a little forgiving and a little understanding, if we possibly can, which is, of course, getting us onto things like trial by jury, when we try to understand the nuance behind and the context behind things. So when somebody's supposedly committed a crime, you have to understand, well, what were the conditions that led up to that, and that's so we're talking about context. We're talking about all of this sort of nuance, and it's complicated. It's much more complicated than people
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah, it's very, very complicated. And I'm thinking now, so the powers that be, or the powers that shouldn't be, all around the globe, okay, they've obviously got various issues of PTSD, or something went wrong in their childhood or what have you. Or are they just loving the lifestyle because they're raking in the money, they're buying up islands and yachts and God knows what else? I mean, do they want to do inner work?
Well, who knows? And obviously, I'm not in a position to know. I don't really know. I don't think I've ever known anyone quite in that position that I can now think back and think, my God, they were one of them.
Yeah.
I don't think I know. I mean, I knew people in government. I've had family actually who were in government, both here and abroad, and I know that they were absolutely, as you would expect anyone to be, with integrity. They conducted themselves honorably, or in the way that they thought that they were. But whether or not, of course, they actually looked at the information deeply and understood it, at the level that needs to be understood, I don't know. Who knows? But you know, they would have been mistaken if they were, you know, if any claims could have been leveled at them about enacting any policy that was, you know, considered immoral or breaching anyone's free will or whatever it is, they just wouldn't have understood it, because in the same way that so many in society don't understand it, you know. So
so what can we do to help people understand it, or can we do anything? Is it something that people have to find for themselves, or can we hold their hands? Can we guide them? Do we teach them more about natural law?
absolutely we can.
Yeah, because you're doing
natural law
courses.
is,
Yeah, you're doing this anyway, aren't you? You're running courses to help people.
yes, I am, and because I finally realized that actually, if we don't tackle these foundational root causes, then we're not going to get anywhere, you know.
Yeah.
I tend to find, actually, I mean, I think I mentioned to you the other day that doing this work where you're talking about natural law is known as the great work. It sounds a bit arrogant. I didn't name it that. Don't worry, it wasn't me that named it that. It is generally known through history as the great work, and the reason why it's known as the great work is because it's not actually terribly rewarding. And the reason why, I mean, it is rewarding for me because I'm genuinely fascinated by it, actually.
Yeah.
And I think about it all the time. There isn't a day that goes by where I don't spot all sorts of interesting situations in life that others probably wouldn't, because I'm tuned into it, and you know. So I love it. I live it. You know, it is rewarding for me. But where it isn't rewarding is because it's tough. It's not. This is not love and light. You know, and the way to win back liberty for the people, and to have a community or a society that is to return to a place where we have abundance and it's fun to be, and we're living the way that we should, with latitude, and you know, we can exercise our free will and all the rest of it. There are certain requirements to have a community or a society like that. There are certain prerequisites, and those prerequisites for that are built into the universe. And that's the study of natural law. So these are the conditions or requirements that, if you want to end up in that place, there are certain things that you have to do and have to adopt and have to understand. And if you don't, you will never get there. End of story. You will just keep manifesting self-destructive patterns. And that's what natural law is about. It's quite objective. It's actually known as one of the esoteric sciences. And you'll notice it's not an art, it's a science. Yeah, because it's very objective knowledge. You can look at the universe and you can observe its tendencies and its patterns. And what you need to do is look at them on the one hand, and then look at humans and their tendencies on the other, human psychology, all the rest of it, our weaknesses, our tendencies, our, you know, all those patterns. And what it really is the interplay between those two, right? So there are certain objective things that you can notice and observe. And if you don't put certain things in place, you're not going to manifest an abundance, an enjoyment, and a happiness in your life, because what you're actually going to manifest is the opposite. You're going to manifest negative consequence, which is really what natural law is all about. It's finding the boundaries of right and wrong behavior. So that's morality. So we now come to the understanding that morality is objective, not from a religious perspective in quite that way, but there is an intelligence in the universe that is observable, and there are certain objective principles that we have to notice and observe and understand and absorb and get within us. And if we can do that, that's when things start to come right in our lives, if we align ourselves with those principles. So I set myself up at doing this a bit, and I do day courses on getting into it very, very superficially, because within a whole day, you would think that that's quite a long time. That's 6 hours of quite intense information, but actually you're barely scratching the surface, in fact.
And these are the courses you're running?
Yeah, so I run those courses every now and again. I at the moment I tend to rely upon other people to find me venues and things like that, because I'm not very good at that sort of thing.
But you're a busy boy. And when you're talking about,
you know, when people in their local areas know their areas better than they know their venues, so
yeah,
they
of
come to
course.
me quite often, and if anybody wants to do that, just get in contact, and I'm very happy to put on a day, and we generally charge about 20 quid, just, you know, just at the door.
And how many people would you like to make it worth
The
your while?
most I've ever had is somewhere between 40 and 45. We had one in London, Chiswick, it went very well.
Yeah.
And that was the most I've ever had. The least I've had was probably about 25.
Right. Okay. So if somebody listening to this wants you to come along anywhere in the country
Yeah,
within
I mean,
reason?
it just depends where we can put one on. So
Yeah.
when
Okay.
people contact me
Okay.
from a local area, and we discuss it, and we if we put it together and we get a date in
Yeah.
the diary, and we find a venue, fantastic, let's do it. You know,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Brilliant.
So
So
that's what I do. And I mean, the other thing that I do is I've got two websites where I'm just putting loads of information out about this stuff anyway.
yeah.
The first one is commonlawconstitution.org, which is really more focused on the British Constitution. And I haven't really mentioned that actually much, because most people associate me with talking about constitutional law.
Mm.
And the reason why I do is because our British Constitution, when you study it deeply, you realize that it's very compatible with natural law. That's what it's doing. It's basically trying to put a system in place to limit the government,
Yeah.
and to make sure that the people are able to conduct within their lives according to natural law, natural justice, and not be affected by that. And what that really means is that it places the people as the final arbiter of law. They are the absolute authority on all matters of law within their community. Now, that's quite amazing when you think about that, actually.
Yeah.
But that's how it should be, because what that means
Yeah.
is that the people are governing themselves. They are their own
Yeah.
self-masters, and they're taking responsibility for the moral character of their community. So that's, I talk about that in the context of the British Constitution on that website, which is commonlawconstitution.org. And then my own website, because that was really for a group for that's existed for a long time, that one. But my own website is lawandalchemy.org, which is going into the much deeper stuff to do with the esoteric sciences and natural law, so that you can get deeper underneath the Constitution and start to see that is really the foundation for it. Things to do with, you know, individual rights, the difference between the ideologies of collectivism on the one hand, which is kind of groupthink and statism, and on the other hand, individualism, which is focusing on this idea of individual rights, that the individual is paramount in society and not the group or the collective. Yeah, because one of those ideologies is self-destructive, and it will take you down and down into an absolute pit.
Yeah.
The ideology of individualism, and understanding that and recognizing what those traits and what those principles are, is what it's all about. That natural law favors an individualist philosophy. So, and I talk about that much more on lawandalchemy.org, some of those philosophies, and you know,
there's a chap called Mark Windows. I don't know if you've ever met him. He does a very good show, but he talks about communitarianism.
Yes, absolutely, very dangerous. Yeah,
very dangerous. It sounds great because you're working in a community and everybody gets a bit of the same thing, but nobody has the right to speak as an individual. So yeah, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, so very briefly to break that down, essentially, that it's you know, it's good to think about communities and other people within you know, your social space, and you know, absolutely brilliant. But it should always be voluntary. See, that's the key. Yeah, there's no moral value in a society that focuses on the collective compulsorily, that forces you into doing it. There's no virtue in that. Yeah, the virtue only comes out when somebody focuses on themselves in order to ground themselves, to make sure that they're okay, that they're strong themselves, and to deal with their own needs. Then you become much stronger and much more capable to help others, which most people will want to do. So we've been led into this trap of thinking that individualists are fundamentally selfish. No, that's not the case, because actually the collective behavior that they do get into, individualists, is done voluntarily because they want to do it. And that's where the real value lies.
And that's kind of going back to the school again, isn't it? Like allowing people to be creative rather than making them sit down and all learn the same thing or do the same thing, stand up, sit down, all that kind of
Yeah.
behavior. It's
Yeah,
bringing out
wherever you've got any kind of social organization, or you've got some kind of patterns that are being imposed on people's behaviors by somebody else or another group, that is social organization. And that's fundamentally collectivist or statist if it's the government doing it. Yeah. So the point about enacting our free will is that we as individuals must be given that ability to enact our free will. Now, where in enacting our free will, we start to encroach on the ability of someone else to do the same, then we're committing a natural law crime, a crime under the universe, and we can't escape that. The universe will always bring back negative consequence to us if we do that. So regardless of whether we put any man-made laws in place, regardless of, you will get consequences anyway. But the idea of the common law, which lots of people talk about, really what common law is constitutional law. The idea of that is to reflect that in our man-made laws, right?
Yeah.
So we understand natural justice, but we reinforce, not that it really needs to be reinforced, but it's really just for clarity, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like murder is a common law crime. It's because you couldn't possibly argue with it. It's really bloody obvious. You know, it couldn't be anything else but a crime, you know.
So when you're talking about things like wars and conscripts, you know, I know some countries are beginning to bring back the conscripts. So young men and perhaps women are having to go to join an army to fight for their country. How would that sort of bear in this natural law situation if they don't want to do it? Breaking the rules?
That's a very obviously a tricky situation because you are breaching someone's free will. But you know, if it depends on the scenario and why it's happening and why that war is there in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Why
we could get into all of we could get into all of that as well.
We've done many rabbit holes talking about war. Okay, going back to the moral side of things, though, with natural law, is it not just a case of following the Ten Commandments? Is it a little bit deeper?
No, it's it's more tricky than that, really, because I mean, first of all, the Ten Commandments is not all natural law. There's other things there too, but there obviously that it's contained within that. So a lot of people shorten it down to, you know, do no harm, cause no loss, and you know, sort of act with integrity, which is it's a pretty good summary of natural law. The difficulty is that you don't always realize how you're causing harm. So when we go back to this whole business of unconscious behavior or unaware behavior that we don't spot within ourselves, quite often you are causing harm to others without even knowing it. And this is one of the things that we go into in my course quite a lot. We start to look at what I call micro lies, which is the little lies that start things off, which is things like exaggerations, recharacterizing a situation to be a little bit more favorable to how you want to think of it. You know, it's a little bit easier to think of certain situations in a certain way because it's just a bit more comfortable. Well, that's a lie, right? And if you build on that lie, it actually gets bigger and bigger. So if that's the line of truth and you start deviating off it in a very small way, you need to correct it very quickly because a lie tends to exaggerate and get further very, very quickly because first of all, you have to maintain it if you don't want to have the embarrassment of admitting that you have lied already. You know, you need to do that quickly. Just get it over and done with. But if you maintain that path of a lie, it'll just get worse and worse and worse. And that's how the tiny lies start to grow and become absolute monsters, which is what has happened in society collectively. Because in the collective, we quite often, you know, there are all sorts of lies in society generally about the things we tell ourselves because it's a bit more comfortable to do so when in fact actually it's bloody awful and it's not true, or you know, there's a common misbelief about something, and you know, so that kind of thing is what we go into, which is this tendency to lie to ourselves, and we gaslight ourselves, we do all kinds of things, and we explore a lot of that, and it's quite shocking to the group quite often as to as to, you know, you suddenly realize by lunchtime, halfway through the course, that my God, we really are screwed up, aren't we? And we are.
Yeah,
We actually really are massively screwed up, and we've got a hell of a lot of healing to do, a hell of a lot of work. And if we can get ourselves straightened out and more authentic and more true to ourselves, we'll just improve everything. Everything will just, you know, all the bad stuff will wither away, because the bad stuff can't sit in an environment of integrity and honesty. Yeah. You change the conditions at a massive level generally, which is why I keep saying, in, you know, my campaigning side of things, I keep saying, look, we really need numbers on this. You've got to talk about this stuff all the time and get as passionate as I am about it. Because actually you are required to do so by the universe. The universe requires you to be interested in your own self-improvement. It's amazing, isn't it? That the universe is actually...
When you say it like that, it's very simple, but it's also very difficult. Again, it's a conundrum, isn't it? Because I think people generally want to be liked, don't they? And sometimes to be liked, they will say these little lies, or they will exaggerate, and then you, like you say, you go down that slippery slope, and it's that snowball effect that things get bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm aware of it myself when I've you know, done things. I try and live in integrity, but as I said to you the other day, sometimes I say something and I think, oh God, why did I say that? Because it's not actually the truth, and I really don't feel good about it. And sometimes I'll retract it and I say, well, actually, it wasn't quite like that, because I can't sit well with it. Once you know, you know, how important these things are, because it is that knock-on effect. It's not just for you as the individual, it's that ripple effect.
And actually, Karen, that's amazing, because that shows that you're massively on that journey already. There are plenty of people out there in society who don't even notice this stuff. They don't even recognize that they are lying to themselves and creating those personas and those little micro lies all the time. They don't spot it, and then wonder why they're creating all kinds of bloody nightmares in their life.
Well, you reap what you sow, don't you? You reap what you sow somewhere along the line. It will come back to you. So is there any hope for us? Like you say, there's a lot of work for us to do. There's a lot of people on this planet that need to do the work. I think every one of us on this planet still need to do the work. Is there any hope, do you think? Are we going to get this sorted?
I mean, it's not a given. I'm just going to say that straight away, that when you understand natural law, you realize that it really is down to us. And that's good and bad, depending on how you want to look at it, you know. But the universe is basically saying, look, you don't move to the top table of enlightenment until you've earned it. And you haven't earned it yet. You know, and that's the key. And it's up to us. We could do it. We could pull it around. But people have to take this stuff seriously, you know. And again, the reason why I push the Constitution, the British Constitution, is it's because it's one of the very few constitutions that contains within it this deep esoteric mechanism of trial by jury in its fullest form, you know. And what that is, in a way, what I call it is the sort of society's shadow workshop, because actually it's in a trial by jury that you have this healing going on. It deeply affects not only the people who are directly, not only the defendant and, you know, the accused, but it deeply affects the jury as well, because the jury is, in a sense, having to face their own prejudices and the ways that they go into denial about things. And it's deeply reflective process. And in fact, quite a lot of research has been done on trial by jury and the sort of the consciousness within juries. And what it does for people as well. And the whole point of the British Constitution is that it's the people themselves that are all three branches of government, right? That it isn't operating like that now. But that's how it was set up to work, so that the people are the judiciary, right? You don't have a judiciary within the government. It's meant to be the people themselves. That's what we mean when we say independent judiciary. It's nothing to do with the three branches of government, the separation of powers. That's just a gaslight. That's just for optics. Okay. The independence of the judiciary is actually to do with the fact that it's the people that are the judiciary. They are the judges, right? And the people are the police. So they're also the executive branch, right? And because you can execute annulment by jury, because you say, no, this piece of legislation in this case is just fallen foul of our consciences. It's just not in alignment with our consciences. So we're going to say, no, not guilty. even though it's quite obvious that that individual has broken the law. Our society calls that now a perverse verdict. But it's not perverse. There's nothing perverse about that. It's absolutely correct if that is the decision that the juries have come to. That makes them the supreme legislature as well. So we've now got three branches of government, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, that basically the people are meant to be operating as. That's the fundamentals of the British Constitution. It places the people as an authority over their own government, so that in a way it's not really a government at all. And this is where the anarchists need to jump on board and get off their backsides and start supporting it, because the problem is that they think that as soon as somebody starts talking about the Constitution, they think, oh, you're talking about the state and government. No, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
Right? Because actually the point about a democratic constitution in its true form is that it reduces the government in power merely to an administration, and it places the people in authority over that administration, meaning you don't really have a government at all.
Yeah.
That is anarchic, which
Yes.
is what they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the magic. That's the gold behind the British Constitution, which is why we should be talking about it every bloody day, all over the country, all over social media. Because if you don't care enough about it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Rant over.
A good rant, a good rant. I'm trying to jump in when you take a breath, but no, it's a very good rant, William. There's a healing modality called, I think it's called the Family Constitution. Have you heard this? Which is very good. I've done a couple of them. It's very powerful. So it's like one person's got an issue and they will stand up and say, my issue is with my brother. So in the group, she'll pick someone to be the brother. And the brother comes forward and the adjudicator or whatever, the healing person will say, well, where do you want your brother to stand? And is that too close, or the other room, or wherever? And she'll decide, the person going through the healing, well, I want him to stand there. And then who's your ally in this? Who was your support? Oh, well, my grandmother. So you choose somebody from the group, that'll be my grandmother. So everybody will have not everybody, but maybe 5 or 6 people in this particular constitution. And then she has this opportunity to explain how she feels, what the brother's done to her over the years.
Yes.
And this poor bloke who's never met her before, he will act that. He'll say, well, I'm sorry I did it, but you did that. So they have this relationship, and then the grandmother will say something, and the mother and the friend, and all these people get involved. So it's not just, let's say, me being healed. Yeah. Everybody is affected because we all have the same emotions. It's just different triggers, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's a great way.
Yes, that's very interesting, because that is forming a court, but really for the purpose of healing.
Yeah,
and it's not a real court, but you're doing it so that shows that's a really interesting thing. So that shows how closely connected a court of law is with the healing process.
It's all
psychological healing process.
Everything's connected. The spiritual, the esoteric, all of it is connected, which I think is great, and that's what you're putting out there. I'm going to ask you this one. I know we're going to have to close soon, because I'm trying to keep it under the hour. Life after death, karma, what goes around comes around. I mean, what's your views on that? There's 3 things, but like mainly life after death and karma. Do we come back and have another go?
Yeah, I think so. I've always thought that.
Good. Oh, good. I like that.
I mean, karma was one of the the sort of the reincarnation. The concept reincarnation was one of the things that was sort of taken out of the Bible, wasn't it, in the 3rd century?
Because there
was a lot of manipulation there, actually, and people will say, oh no, Will's satanic now, he's New Age, but actually esoteric Christianity very much had that in place, and so did all the other religions. The original roots of all of the religions was much closer to this deeper understanding of that esoteric spirituality, and absolutely, because it's fundamentally about healing. It's about self-improvement. We are all fragments of God. It doesn't mean to say we are God. Far from it. Let's have humility too, but we are fragments of the divine, and that divinity is willing us, if you like, to self-improve and to raise our consciousness. And what we mean by that, it's not a New Age thing either. It's self-improvement. It's healing. It's becoming the best that we can be and becoming more divine. And so we're required to do that and to learn lessons. That's what natural law is all about. It's about throwing difficult situations at us all the time and getting us to are we going to fail, you know, in that regard, in making those choices, or are we going to take the brave path and understand what lesson there is to learn in that and to call something out or whatever it may be? So that's what it's all about. And I think that the multi-lives is all about that. It's about putting ourselves in different positions and different kinds of family situations, different types of lives, in order to learn deeper level, different scopes of spiritual lessons. And yeah, definitely. I've always thought that.
That's good. That's good. So we'll have another chance then. Because the truth does hurt sometimes. It's very hard to be honest and truthful all the time, isn't it? Because not everybody likes the truth. We don't always like to be told it. And I think that's why sometimes perhaps we avoid telling it. And there's ways of telling it. Obviously, you don't have to be sort of brutal if it's a personal thing, like, oh, you're fat. That's not very nice. But it's, I think, honesty, integrity, authenticity, it's key. This is all about the natural law that you're talking about, which is amazing. Do you want to have also say something about consciousness, which, you know, something about consciousness? What is your interpretation of consciousness?
Yeah, so consciousness, I mean, we were talking about that earlier, and I tend to just substitute the word consciousness for awareness. You know, how are you, you know, if you, because you're right, that word is often thrown around and people don't really know what it means, you know, but actually if we just nail that down a little bit, if you are in everyday language, if you say, yeah, I'm conscious of that, it means you're aware of it, you know. So what consciousness is how much you are aware of yourself, of your own behavior. Yeah, so in other words, if you are a conscious human being, you're somebody who has, broadly speaking, self-analyzed. You've started to spot the lies and the contradictions in the things that you say and that you do. You know, quite often people do this. You know, they'll sort of say, oh, I'm really principled in this, you know, but then there's a completely separate compartment of their life where they're just absolutely totally in contradiction. And you can point that out and they'll get quite angry because they'll suddenly spot it. And and that's a nasty conflict or a contradiction within yourself. And that's what we've got to try to do, is to iron all of that out, so that when you apply certain moral principles, you do it consistently right across the board in all aspects of your life. And people don't very easily do that. It's difficult. There are all sorts of blind spots that we have. So being conscious is about self-reflection. It's what you said. It's about, you know, getting rid of those personas and those lies and those contradictions, so that you become somebody of integrity and honesty, and you're constantly analyzing yourself, so that you don't step into those mistakes and those traps that we fall into very easily.
Thank you for that. A great answer. I love that. And my final question is this ascension thing. You know, in this freedom movement, a lot of people saying that we're ascending to the 5th dimension and we're leaving the 3D reality and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you've come across people saying that. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think I think there is an ascension process, but I don't think it's. I think the ascension process is put in place by a lot of bloody hard work. I think it's about collectively addressing our lies and our contradictions within society, and it's about doing it at the individual level. So as above, so below. That's one of the Hermetic principles, the principle of correspondence. That, you know, you can know the thing at the macro level. You can know about the universe or society level by looking within yourself. You know, so we are often reflection of the macro, and the macro is a reflection of the individual, right? So yeah, I mean, you know, yes, we have that ability to ascend, but do I think that we're anywhere close to it at the moment? Not really. No. I don't see it. I don't see it around us, because I don't think that people care enough. And the 8th Hermetic principle, the hidden Hermetic principle, is often known as the care principle, which is what the G stands for in Freemasonry at the highest level. So you're told at various different points of Freemasonry that it stands for geometry or God or whatever, and there are all sorts of different things that it can stand for. But at the very highest level, what it actually stands for is the word Janare. But it's really about that care principle, which is the feminine dynamic that I was talking about earlier. What do you care enough about in the world to put your will behind? In other words, what are you paying attention to? Yeah, these are the things. What are you spending your time on? Spending time, paying attention to. Isn't it interesting that we use those kind of money words there? That was Mark Passio that brought me to that attention to that one. You know, but that's really what it is. It's what do you care enough about in the world to put your will behind? That means, what are you going to take action over? Not just think about a little bit every now and again, or, you know, it's what are you actually going to cause yourself in your solar plexus to get off your chair and, right, I've had enough of this, I'm going to do something about it. You know, that's the feeling that you get in the solar plexus, which is the action. That's the male child in the Trinity. So you have the father and the mother, which is the thinking, the mentalism, which is the mind, and the mother is the emotion, what do you care about, and then the male child is the action, right? And so that's the Trinity that you find in religions. And
because also in yoga, it's your third chakra, it's your willpower. Again, so it's the same sort of thing. The yellow,
what it is.
Yeah.
So there you go. So lots of rants there.
Lots of rants. And in other words, as you're talking about paying and spending, I thought of investing. I was thinking, what other words? It's
absolutely investing. Brilliant. Yeah.
Quite amazing. Fabulous. Oh, I could talk to you all day. I could. It's fascinating. Anything you want to say to close, Will?
No, I mean, just you know, I ask people to keep an eye on commonlawconstitution.org, where I do lots of ranting on there. But yeah, keep in mind that the British Constitution, if we talk about that a lot and understand it properly, you've got to educate yourself about it and how it really works. And it's ultimately about full fat trial by jury, the full fat version, as I like to call it, which is, you know, knowing that a jury has the independent right to judge on law independently of government. Yeah, and not many people talk about that. And so that's absolutely key as a mechanism. So keep an eye on that. That's what commonlawconstitution.org is about. And then at a much deeper level, when we really get into the esoteric information, that's lawandalchemy.org. And on both of those websites, I usually publicize when I've got a course coming up and someone's been kind enough to say locally that they've got a venue for me, and we'll dive in and do some good stuff. But it's usually a lot of fun. We you know, those courses, actually, people go away at the end just with their minds blown, certainly, because, you know, this is not about processes and solutions. You know, I'm going to write a notice letter to the government and then everything will be sorted. No, it's not about that. That's as you can tell from the things that we've been discussing today, it's not about any of that. So yeah, so that, keep an eye on those two websites, and if anyone out there's got a local venue and you want to get in touch with me, you know, by all means do so, and we'll have a chat and see if we can set something up.
And you like to go and talk as well, don't you? Obviously, but you're very happy to present at certain conferences around the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be worth my while, because obviously the travel, if it's a long way, you know, I mean, I'm in the south of the country, so, you know, if you know, I love going to the north of the country, by the way, but it's obviously a lot more effort, it's a lot more expensive. So if we can work out a way of making that work, fantastic. That would be absolutely brilliant, you know. But yeah, happy to do that. But the courses are the best, because it makes it much more worth my while, and for you as well, because you get all day.
People, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Keyte, thank you so much. It's fascinating. I'm sure we'll chat again very soon, because there's more to explore. But yeah, thank you for your time. And those watching, if you do like it, give us a thumbs up, share it, comment, and maybe subscribe to the channel. So I'll see you later.